Donna. I
Welcome.
would like to convene this meeting of the Santa Margarita Groundwater Agency Board of Directors for May 26, 2022. Call us to order. Donna, can you take the roll call, please?
Actually, I'm going to do that, Chair.
Brett, okay.
So we'll go with Director Anfer,
Here.
Director Koenig,
Here.
Director McPherson. I do not see him signed up yet. Director Cassidy,
Here.
Director Koopman,
Here.
Director Pollock,
Here.
Director Gillis,
Here.
Director Stiles.
Here.
We have Director Perry.
Here.
Director Ackerman is absent with prior notice, and Chair Mayhood.
I'm here.
Okay, so we do have Director Smalley, I believe.
Yes.
Here.
Thank you. And Director Smalley is a voting director today. So really quickly going through the list of the alternates, we have no Director Baskin. We have no Director Brown. We have Director Eckwall here. We have no Director Lind, no Director Hayes, and I believe we do not have Director Hutchison either. So they're all alternates who are here. Director Eckwall is alternate and here just in a non-speaking mode. Sorry. So we have a quorum, Chair.
Okay. With that, are there any additions or deletions to the agenda?
There's none from staff.
Okay. Then we reach the portion of our meeting where we have oral communications from the public on matters that are not on the agenda tonight, but are within the purview of Santa Margarita Groundwater Association. Are there any comments from the public?
We do have a member of the public here wishing to speak in the room. I think, yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Where's the microphone? Is it just in general?
Everywhere.
Okay.
Yeah.
My name is Nick Vrolik, and I used to be a member of the board. That was prior to the Paradise Fire, which took my daughter's home and son-in-law's home, which instigated my resignation from the board. As many of you know, I used to be a member. Well, I am here tonight to voice my opposition to potentially charging private well owners some sort of fee relating to the private well and the water that comes from their private well. I have said many times that private well owners pay a very high cost for providing water to their use. A few of these costs are as follows: well drilling, pump installation, water tank installation, all of the infrastructure that is required to put that water to practical use. I recently was faced with having to drill a new well because my old one ran dry, possibly because of the extreme amount of water that was pumped from the ground to fight the recent wildfires. We really don't know why, but I do know my well went dry. Please see the attached 2 relevant invoices that I've had to pay to keep water flowing to my home. One of them is the cost to drill the new well at $53,661. The cost to install the new pump was $8,065. Those are just the 2 basics. That doesn't include any of the additional ancillary costs. For this reason, I want to again ask of you to not overburden us with any additional costs or fees that you might be contemplating charging private well owners for the use of what is legally and rightfully theirs without having to pay the fees that this organization is contemplating and has been contemplating charging private well owners. Now, I'm specifically talking about the de minimis private well owners who are on 4 units on a well or less. I am not talking about private well owners who are with mutual water systems, et cetera, et cetera. So please understand that it's strictly limited to the de minimis users, and those de minimis users are relegated to using no more than 2 acre-feet per year. If they go over that, then of course they could fall into some other area where charges could possibly be levied against them, or they might fall into a whole other category. I don't know, but I am specifically relating to the de minimis users with 2 acre-feet or water per year or less. And I do have a public handout, which I have stamped, enter into the public record, and that explains my cover letter and the 2 invoices that I have talked about in just now. So I'll be leaving those here for any of you to obtain, and then you can have them in the public record also. Thank you.
Thank you, Ned. We'll make sure that the materials that you brought will be appended to the next board agenda as a form of written communication that the association received.
Thank you.
Okay.
Chair Mayhood, just for the record, J.M. Brown is attending today instead of Bruce McPherson.
Okay, great.
So he joined, I believe, 6:05, and JM, I did move you over to panelists. I think you might need to do something on your screen to join this group. Okay. We're good now. Thank you.
Okay. I think the next thing is it the consent agenda? Does anybody want to pull anything off of the consent agenda to discuss? Let's see.
Nobody in the room here?
I don't see any hands up. Can you help me on this, Paret, if you see any?
Yep, none in the room and none online either.
Okay. All right, then I believe it's our practice to vote the whole consent agenda. Is that correct?
That's true. Yep.
Okay. Would somebody like to move the consent agenda?
I move adopting the consent agenda, approving, I should say.
And I'll second.
Okay. Paret, would you like to take a vote on that?
We'll do a roll call. We have a motion from Director Perry, second Director Stiles. And then we go around. Director Ankler.
Aye.
Koenig.
Aye.
Brown.
Aye, though I should abstain on the minutes portion as I did not attend that meeting.
Okay, noted. Cassidy.
Aye.
Kootman.
Aye.
Pollock.
I will also abstain from approval of the minutes. But aye on the 2.2.
Okay, thank you. Gillis.
Aye.
Stiles.
Aye.
Perry.
Aye.
Smalley.
Aye, but I will also abstain on the minutes since I did not attend that meeting.
Got that. Thank you. And Mayhood.
Aye.
Thank you. It passes with, we have 8 yeses and 3 abstains.
Okay. Next up, we have the monitoring network enhancement update.
I believe we're going to go straight to Georgina King, who is going to share her screen. Georgina, I'm going to give it a try. Yep, here it goes.
Okay, great. Okay. Well, good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me back to talk about how the project is going to install new wells throughout the basin. I think you had the tech memo attached to the agenda here or your packet, and so maybe you got a chance to look through that, and if not, I'll give you a little tour here. if you remember in the GSP, we had 9 wells that we had proposed to go in. And after much back and forth, we have ended up with 8, it seems now. And there was back and forth during GSP development too about which ones to put in. And so we have the 9th well. We were going to put one in a community up here called the Western Road community. And there's no county right of way there. And it's just the road is a private road that goes through all their properties. And we could not find anyone from the association. We couldn't contact anyone. Director Cassidy did talk to a private well owner that I had identified that they had a bit of land right next to the road that I thought would be suitable, and that was not going to work. So we've decided we've done as best we can, and we will not put a well in this area. But I must say that those people that rely on water from mostly the Monterey Formation, which is a poor aquifer, and I fear that they could be impacted during these dry years here. And there is no monitoring well there. So maybe we'll hear from them again at some time. But for now, we're only going to be drilling the 8 wells that you see on this map here, stretching from Love Creek in the north down to Bean Creek. So up here in Love Creek, and then down here is Bean Creek. So there are a lot of wells that are mostly located in areas where there are private domestic well pumpers, so we can have a look at groundwater conditions, because these are all data gap areas, and also fairly near to creeks, so that we can try and understand the interactions between surface water and groundwater as time goes on. So the first, actually I should say, if any point you want to ask me a question about any of these sites, let's do it while I'm on the slide. Then we don't have to go back to it, although we can at the end go back to certain ones if you want, but I don't mind being interrupted as we go through here. So the first one is at Vine Hill School. And this is the deepest well of the 8, estimated 800 feet. It will go through a little bit of Santa Margarita at the Lompico, and then into the Butano deep. And there's the reason why we have this well here is that there are a number of wells on this, or 2 wells on the south side of 17 that are pumping in the Butano. And we don't have really a dedicated monitoring well down in this area that would to be able to see what the effects on the Butano are. And good news is that this week we did get an easement, so to do the construction and then ongoing monitoring and maintenance at that site. And so it's just inside their gate here. It's the north part of the school. Here's the school, and there's this little driveway to access part of the school, and that's where we'll be putting the well.
Mark, I think
Yeah, we have
Mark had a question about this one. I think that he submitted to you before the meeting, Mark Smalley.
Yes.
Mark, do you want to just quickly repeat that?
Sure. So that the rest of the directors can understand. At this location, since we're drilling as deep as 800 feet, is it something to consider screening the upper aquifers at this location also, such as the Lompico, which could be done, I believe, by simply putting in an additional piece of casing to screen off that upper aquifer, since we have what I think are limited information in the upper ones at this particular location. So what are your thoughts on that, Georgiana?
Yeah, and they're really good suggestion. And I thought about, the pros and cons of doing that. And there is there are monitoring, wells monitoring the Lompico about a mile south of this site. There is nothing really north of this site. And so I agree, this is an area where we would have liked it. And now I'm going to, and that's really good reasons to put it in there, is because we don't know, although that we have a little bit of information down for this a little bit south. But when we were looking at where to put these wells, we were trying to, we had grant money, and we were trying to get as much coverage as we could. And putting 2 wells in one location, at the time when we were doing this, it was not something we even thought about. We just thought, let's just get it as wide as we can and understand things that we really don't know anything about the groundwater levels. This area we somewhat do, not perfectly because there is no well at this location, but near enough. The other, and so when we did the grant application, we were only put in budget for a single well. Now, if we were to do, your suggestion would mean making the drilling a bigger diameter, and then the cost associated with putting 2 PVC casings in and doing all the separation and all of that puts the cost up over what we got grant funding for. So, and also the other, it would, if we ever needed to, I think we could come back and drill a second well. And our company generally doesn't like the nested well, the one where you have 2 inside of one borehole, because those seals fail often, and we just rather just have them as single boreholes. But a very good suggestion. Made me think about it for a bit.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Jack?
Yes. Is there something we could do, since this is at the Vine Hill School? It seems like a wonderful educational opportunity for the students there. Is there something simple we could do? I don't know, to just pique interest, maybe have a few facts, but just sort of pique the interest of the kids?
That's a good idea, really, Jack. We thought we would be drilling this in the summer vacation, but things are, we're not able to meet that very ambitious schedule, I think. So it's probably going to be while they're at school. So it is a great opportunity. And I do think we should offer to do something, and whoever our field person is out there, or I can come out, we can definitely give a little orientation of what's happening out there for the students.
Maybe
If the
even
school's interested.
a dedication or ribbon cutting or something that the kids could attend, not in the evening, but in the daytime or something.
I see.
Yeah, and we do have our outreach person that has been dealing with kids, so maybe contact her and see if she can come up with something nifty for us to do. I think that's a great idea.
And she's listening. I saw her.
She's
Yeah,
here.
I think she is.
Yeah, thank you. Great idea.
Okay.
Yeah, this might be a good place even to bring the little model and everything, and give, and tie a bit of that into it as well.
Okay, Ruth?
Sorry, it's been a while since I've been on Zoom. I think it could be a permanent installation of some signage, possibly, and an ongoing thing about the kids going out there and where does your water come from? Well, here's But I think it's a great educational opportunity, and any of these wells that go in higher trafficked locations, we should consider signage and public education.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because we try and make these as discreet as possible, because we don't want people playing with them.
Yeah.
And at the end, I'm going to show you a picture of what it looks like once the well's done, and it's nothing. At this school, maybe it could be different, slightly different, but at the others, we just don't want people messing with it. So
good point. I sort of wondered about those ones on the side of the road and if people were going to be driving over them. But that's later on.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, we've learned the hard way about that. Are there any more questions on Vine Hill School?
I don't see any.
Okay, great. Let's move on down. It's actually upstream, but it's going to be downstream of Mackenzie Creek. This is a stretch of the river, of the creek here, where where here's Mackenzie Creek comes into Bean Creek, and in the summer months, actually maybe even June, July, Bean Creek goes dry. It goes underground at this point, and then it resurfaces again. And so this monitoring well is located to try and understand that, and it's co-located with a gauge that was just put in by Balance nearby. And this is a very shallow well. You see here's a creek down here, and there's a lot of these terraces. And so we have to drill through this, and it's going to be about 80 feet, only 80 feet, because you just want to get below the groundwater level a little bit. And that's expected to be around creek level. So that's in the county right of way. 5 of the wells on county right of way, and I'll show you what the drill rigs look like. And so this one would be an auger that would go in. It's a small thing, and it wouldn't impact. There'd be road control, traffic control here as well. But this small space, a small shoulder, is plenty for them to put that well in. Okay, and you'll see more like this, very similar. Here is one on Ruins Creek. The county right-of-way is this line next to the road, and then it ends at this parcel over here, and then there's no county right-of-way. So we're putting the well next to some wonderful trees over here, and the shoulder's pretty wide. And there's a lot of domestic use in above north of this location, and then it's also right next to a creek. Lockhart Gulch on Nelson Road here is targeting the Santa Margarita, as the other one was, and this one is 100 feet. This is kind of maximum that it would probably be, very similar to the previous one with a much bigger shoulder. Another thing we have to watch out for is it can't be in a location where cars regularly park, because then when you want to go and take a measurement, there's a problem. This is on Bear Drive. This is one in Santa Margarita as well, about 200 feet, also county right of way. This one is on a San Lorenzo Valley Water District owned property. This well that you're looking at on the property is not unused production well that hasn't been used for quite some time. And so this little parcel that you see on the map here is where about 300-foot well would be drilled. And I'm quite sure about the depth on this one because we have historical data from this well. And we have a very good idea of where groundwater levels are. And there is a creek, Newell Creek is off to the west here. And the district's Quail Hollow well field is off to the east. So it's kind of between their well field and Newell Creek. So it's located there. And this one, we are working on an easement, construction easement that between the agency and San Lorenzo Valley Water District. Another one of the county right-of-way, this is on Love Creek, where this the Monterey Formation here. This one's going to about 300 feet. Again, a nice wide shoulder here. This is an interesting one, lower down on Bean Creek from the earlier one that I mentioned. We did want to put a well. I thought it would be along Mount Herman Road. Well, that didn't last long because I went to visit that road and look for a site, and I said, no, I don't want to ever do that again. It's a bit busy for me, and for a drill rig and people, it's just no good. So fortunately, we realized that there's land trust property just nearby, and so this is an old quarry called the Gaia Quarry, and it's got a Santa Margarita. This, you see the sand, you can see that Santa Margarita, but it's a very thin blanket over this part of the site. It's just kind of through gravity made its way down, but underneath that is the Monterey, which is outcropping in the creek here. So that's what we want to, that's what the target is for this well, is the Monterey. And also this one is actually site number 8, because when the bids come in, if we find that they're too, because of how crazy things have gone since, you know, when a few years ago, we requested grant funding for this, and now prices have gone crazy with construction and materials. So this one is the last one. And this is one that we were back and forth on when we were developing the GSP as well. So if there isn't enough budget to cover this one, we won't do it. So that's why it's number 8. Going on to the drilling, this is what the
Excuse
rigs are
me,
gonna.
Georgina,
Yeah.
I think we did have a question from a
Oh,
panelist.
good. Okay, sorry.
I didn't see who it was. Somebody's raised their hand.
Jeff Goodman.
Jeff. go
Yeah.
ahead.
Yeah, hi there. Thank you. Yeah, it seems like the Monterey has been described to us as an aquitard, right? So
Right.
you put a monitoring, it seems like there's not a lot of lateral flow in the Monterey, that if you have any moisture in the Monterey, it's probably due to fractures nearby or something coming from a lower or an upper layer, probably. So it didn't seem like trying to get a level of the Monterey makes a whole lot of sense. It seems like maybe not those last 2 wells, the 8 and 9, not being in the Monterey makes a lot of sense. I don't know.
Well, we don't know much about it in this area here. Parts of the Monterey are more, have a coarser grain to them. And as you know, a lot of wells in this area rely on the Monterey. In this area, not so much, but this is more to try and understand the interaction with the stream. And fortunately, there were a lot of geology reports related to this quarry that I was provided by the Land Trust. And it looks like when they drilled the monitoring wells for the cleanup of the underground storage tanks that leaked a little here, that their wells only went into the like 30 feet into the little bit of Santa Margarita, and they said they was pretty much dry, but until they got to the intersection with, well, the contact with Monterey, and that's when they got the water. So I think most of the water is there, and we talked about that a lot during GSP development, that you know, that contact between the two is where there's springs, and it contributes to the flow in the creeks. So we're hoping to screen that part as well.
Okay. Dale, you had your hand up?
Yeah, just quick. Georgina, this looks like it's close to the Hanson Quarry, which is, I think, just south of Bean Creek. And I know they had several wells over on their property. Have you investigated using any of those existing wells for monitoring?
Yeah, they're really in the Santa Margarita. And did we consider that? There are quite a lot of wells around there because it's where the Pacientempo well field is, right?
Right.
So we do already have quite a lot of data there. And the historical data for those wells, I believe they are owned by some private people now, who bought the quarry.
Yeah.
So, but looking in the past, I did look at those levels compared to Pacientempo, and they were very similar.
Okay.
So yeah, I think we're covered with the Pacientempo wells, monitoring wells. Yeah.
Jack?
Yes, Georgina, you mentioned that if we run out of budget, we may not do this well for the Geyer Quarry. And earlier you mentioned that we're having issues with finding a site for the Weston well.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm wondering, if we don't do those 2 wells, does that in any way jeopardize our sustainability plan with the state? I remember the state, one of the reasons the state denied plans in other areas had to do with not enough data and not enough monitoring wells. So I'm just wondering if it could be an issue for us if we don't build these 2.
No, it's not an issue. There are quite I think even without these, at this early stage of GSP implementation, you're okay. There is more grant funding coming out and for GSP implementation, and so those could be covered at a later stage.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? All right, then go ahead and continue on, Georgina.
Okay. So these are the types of machinery that would be using to drill the holes. The auger that I was mentioning for the shallow wells of about 100 feet, we would use that. You can see this is track mounted, and it's limited. And so when we need a bit more, we go to rotosonic. Sonic meaning they kind of are vibrating vibrating as they pull the casing down, as opposed to here you see this is a rotary, direct rotary, this is a big rig, kind of what you use if you're drilling a water supply well, and there's mud and there's all sorts of things going on in this. It's a whole different thing, and this is the one this is the rig we would use for the 800-foot well. But in the tech specs that we're putting out, we're giving a range of a few options of drilling methods they can use, and they have whoever's bidding has to decide what works best for them. We don't want to be too prescriptive because that could limit who bids. And we are a little nervous about not having any bidders. Mid-County bid theirs and they got one bid. Yeah. And some other projects we're working on, we have to really, beg them to bid, and then they say, yeah, we can, but it's going to be in a year's time we can do the work. Everyone's just crazy busy with this drought.
Okay. Ruth?
I hit that. Do the rotosonic and the auger require 24/7 drilling?
No, none of these will. None of these. Only when they're doing the production wells that certain parts of it require 24 hours. This is just daytime. It's going to be just between, I don't know, whatever, 8 and 7 and 6 or something like that. Yeah.
And how long will it take to drill like one of these 200-footers?
Probably 2 days, 2-3 days, but the deep one in Vine Hill might be 2 to 3 weeks. That's the longest, but at least it's not on a road, so that's okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and the shallow ones, 100 feet, they'll be a day. Yeah, they go quick.
Okay, Mark?
Do you have a list of firms that you intend to reach out to?
Yes, we do.
And in addition to reaching locally, is out of area contacts something that would be advised at this point?
Yes, no, we
Okay,
are going to
good.
spread our net very, we kind of saw what happened in Mid-County, and
Yes.
so we're learning from that. And
Good.
we thought of extending the bid period, but that doesn't help our timeline very much, but rather we want to cast a wider net. Yeah.
Good.
Okay.
Questions from the attendees on anything they've seen so far before Georgina goes on?
Looking for hands, so if you are one of the attendees, raise your hand, please. Don't see
I don't
any.
see anything, so go ahead, Georgina.
Okay. Can tell I'm excited to share this with you. I'm plowing on here, but this is one of the second to last slide, I think. And so this is what the wells will look like. Most of them are going to be 2-inch PVC, Schedule 40, that goes into the well. They drill a larger borehole. They put the 2-inch casing in, they hang it in there, and it's got a screen, targeted exactly where we want it. We're trying to monitor. And then they backfill it with a gravel pack. It's this speckled material here to just above the screen. And then they put in a transitional seal, which is usually plaster sand, 5 feet of that. And then they will backfill the rest with a seal of cement. And so, and then there's this wellhead completion, which is below ground. So this is the ground surface on top here, and all the business happens here, where the 2-inch is coupled to an adapter that makes it a bigger diameter, so it's easier to put instruments into it and things like that. So that's what the 2-inch, and all of them except for the deep Vine Hill one are going to look like that. And Vine Hill is going to be 4-inch and thicker PVC, schedule 80. And it needs to be a stronger well because of the pressures that you'd get at 800 feet. And similar design with how it's constructed, and then the wellhead itself. But here there's no widening of it because it already is 4 inches. And what that looks like on the surface, this is what the well looks like. We hope it to look insignificant to people. It's just, I don't know, how big is that thing? It's maybe a foot, 12 inches, 10, 12 inches, little cover with 3 little bolts in it. And everything is happening underneath this in a vault. So we try and make it inconspicuous like that.
So Georgina, the cone is not going to be there. It's just to give us a sense of the
Just so
size.
you notice it. Otherwise, maybe you wouldn't have noticed it. Yeah. Yeah. Now, I know some people have put wells, because we sample those wells, and it's off the beaten track, and then you're looking for this thing, and it's been overgrown, and it's kind of hard. So it'd be nice if there was a cone there, but. Yeah, these are going to be, on the side of the road, and you can imagine it's easy for someone to park over something like that. But usually they should go out ahead of time before they go and take a measurement. If they're worried about it, to put a sign to say that no one should park there. You put one of those boards over it, say no one park there. So that seems to work too. And so the diagram that you see here is all in the tech specs that have been prepared. And so I've pretty much gone over all the other activities. So the tech specs are done. We are still out for the 30-day public notice period of a notice of exemption for these wells, that we don't have to do CEQA, that it's just a monitoring well. That public period ends on June 10th, and then we'll see if anyone from the public has objected or provided any information to us. And we would then have that, we need to provide that to DWR to show them that we've done that. And then there's all the easements that I've already talked about, at Vine Hill School, which we just got this week, and then the Land Trust and the San Lorenzo Valley Water District, that's being worked on right now. And then there are all the documents that need to be put together for it to go out to bid. And so Perret staff and agency staff are working on that, putting the packet together, which has all the contracts and all the legal stuff. So Terry's involved, and then bringing and combining that with the tech specs that we've completed. And so that's where we are. Like I said, hoping to be drilling probably August, September, start drilling there if everything goes well.
Okay, are there any more questions from members of the board? I don't see any. Actually, I have one, Georgina. Sort of thinking ahead to some of the things that we're planning on doing in the future. I would like to know what you do to archive any of the material that you take out of the drill holes.
Yeah.
You keep rock chips. And the reason I'm asking is thinking about, some of the early steps that we might undertake to evaluate the feasibility of ASR. Some of these samples that we might get of the Butano and especially the Lompico, at depth in the deep well, where we get samples that, that are like the conditions that we're likely to encounter in an ASR well. it might be a great chance to get materials that would be appropriate for, benchtop experiments. And maybe you know about this, or maybe Rosemary, I know I think you're an attendee out there, have, any thoughts about this as something that we might want to take advantage of sampling these things at depth and preserving those samples?
Yeah, so that is a good question, and I definitely, and we do keep this, we put it into chip trays, and we do keep that. The two different methods of drilling, the direct rotary that we'll be using to drill the deep well is pounding, and it's going to crush everything. It comes up as really as little chips. And although we know it's a solid sandstone, when we see it, it's in all these bits. The rotosonic actually brings out a core. I didn't mention that, but it does have the core. It is much more expensive, and it won't go, and it will not be a good method to go this deep into such a hard sandstone, because it is incredibly hard. I've drilled through it before, and they had to the driller had to replace the drill bit. It just ate through the drill bit. So to do benchtop testing on just the chips, that's a pretty hard. You kind of do need to get some kind of core to do that.
I think there's two different things. You need core to do physical measurements of porosity and permeability and whatever, but small chips, of crushed rock would be perfectly fine for doing chemical studies and petrographic studies.
Right.
So if we're trying to see that if you put oxygenated water on those things that arsenic's released, that crushed material is kind of what you want to study anyway. So.
And that we should coordinate if that's something that was of interest. We can get more sample, because we only get a small amount. We only keep a small amount. So if any more needs to be obtained, we can definitely ensure that doesn't get trashed.
Well, let's make sure that we coordinate on that, and and maybe other what else we might do that on. And Rosemary, I see your hand is up, so go ahead.
Thanks. I will say that we did that kind of work in the Mid-County Basin with samples that either existed from some of the monitoring or other wells that have been drilled that have been retained, the core samples. But I do think it would be a good idea, Georgina, we can certainly check with Robert Marks to see if he has recommendations about how to, what stuff to collect as we go through whenever, however it's best to do it with the drilling that you're planning to do. And Robert is our hydrogeologist who, I think Georgina knows him, but he's done the work in the Mid-County Basin looking at these hydrogeochemical analysis. We could get some advice from him about, what to look for and what to keep if we can get it in this process.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Jeff?
Yeah, I just want to say I support the idea of collecting the samples. I think that's a great idea. And the other question I have is that there was a description of the gravel layers and the sand layers and the cement layers and the monitoring wells. And I just want to make sure, I'm sure this is already being done, but just to affirm it, that they're making sure that the upper aquifers aren't draining into the lower aquifers by putting the sand and gravel and cement layers at the right appropriate places.
Yeah, the cement is really to protect the lower aquifers from the upper aquifers. Yes, correct.
Right.
And the county comes and witnesses that seal. That's very important.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Georgina. That was fun. I don't know.
Yeah,
I feel like we're actually doing something instead of talking about things that we're going to do. So that was great.
Well, you should come when we start drilling. We'll let you know, and you can
I want to see those
organize
little
a field trip.
coming up.
Yeah.
So that construction contract needs to be approved by the board after the bid process is completed. So you'll get to approve it before the work actually happens.
Okay. All right. So next item on the agenda is our stream flow monitoring report for 2021.
And we have Chelsea, Neil. I don't know, Sarah, if you wanted to say something or go straight to Chelsea with this.
No, but I'd be happy to introduce Chelsea. So, as you all recall, Balanced Hydrologics has been doing our surface water monitoring for a number of years now during the GSP development and now into the implementation phase. And Chelsea and her team had put together a great report that we wanted to make sure that you all got to see. And we've asked her to give just a little summary to everybody today. So take it away, Chelsea.
Great, let me share my screen. Nice to see you all. Thanks for having me. Okay, I think should be good there. Yeah, so I just wanted to provide a summary of the water year 2021 stream flow and temperature monitoring that we did in support of the Santa Margarita GSP. So I have a little bit of a delay here, it looks like. Here we go. So first, I'll talk about what the monitoring goals are. Then we'll look at the water year 2021 monitoring. And I know we talked about the water year 2022 monitoring at the last board meeting, but I'll just provide a quick recap of that as well. So the goals of the stream flow monitoring are really to help characterize the conditions at the inception of the Santa Margarita GSP. As Georgina just talked about, the stream flow monitoring, in addition to the wells, is part of the monitoring network to help evaluate the connection between surface water and groundwater within the basin, specifically really looking at the stream flow depletion. This data will also be used to help provide a quantitative baseline against which the future projects and management actions can be assessed in those future 5-year assessments. So during water year 2021, we operated 4 stream flow gauges. Those gauges are the San Lorenzo River upstream of Love Creek, Newell Creek just upstream of the San Lorenzo River, Ziente Creek at Woodwardia, Bean Creek at Mount Herman Camp. And then I'll also point out here, we previously had a gauge on Bean Creek at Mount Herman Road. That's a former USGS location, and that gauge has currently been suspended. And then we can also rely on the USGS gauge on the San Lorenzo at Big Trees. So each of these gauges are monitored for flow, temperature, and specific conductance. And then we also went out and made observations at a select number of groundwater dependent ecosystems. As you all know, water year 2021 was a critically dry year. The upper part of this graph shows annual precipitation historically. During water year 21, we received 18.75 inches, which is about 37% of average at the San Lorenzo Valley Water District rain gauge in Boulder Creek. And the mean annual flow was 20.4 CFS, which is 16% of average at the USGS gauge at Big Trees, and that's shown down here. This is the second consecutive dry year. You can see that in the precipitation, as well as in the runoff at the USGS Big Trees gauge. And then water year 2021 was also the first post-fire water year where the western portion of the San Lorenzo River watershed burned during the CZU fire. Of our stream flow gauges, the San Lorenzo River upstream of Love Creek is the only one that monitors any of a part of a burned watershed. The other ones are outside of that burned area. This is a summary of all of the hydrographs from each of the gauges. So on the very top here, we have precipitation. And during the summer, we didn't receive any precipitation until October. So our range here starts from May till November are the dates. And then for these hydrographs, I just want to point out that the y-axis is logarithmic. So for the San Lorenzo River upstream of Love Creek, that's this very top plot here, the mean daily flow ranged from about 5.7 CFS down to 1.5 CFS. And just looking at a comparison with water year 2020, this year was about a CFS lower on average. So last year was about 6.5 CFS down to 2.5 CFS. On Newell Creek, the seasonal base flow started around 1.4 CFS and then ended somewhere around 1.1. As you know, this site's downstream of the Loch Lomond Reservoir, which is regulated. So the city releases a CFS from Loch Lomond to promote aquatic and riparian habitat in Newell Creek. And you'll notice this period here where flow is decreased to about half a CFS. And during this time, the city reduced bypass flows because of construction-related activities that were happening at the reservoir. And then when flows remained back up at 1 CFS at the end of the year. And this recession is pretty similar to previous years, as you can imagine, since it's a regulated bypass flow. Moving down, we have Ziente Creek at Woodwardia, which started off about 2.3 CFS and then ended just around 1 CFS. And this is pretty similar to water year 2020. I think 2020 started off around 3 and ended up around 1, so pretty comparable. And finally, we have Bean Creek at Mount Herman Camp, where the recession went from just a little over 2 CFS down to about 1.5 CFS. And similarly, this was pretty consistent with what we saw last year during water year 2020. I'll just also point out, you'll notice that at the end of all of these, you get a slight increase in flow, and that's just due to the reduced evapotranspiration that's happening in the fall. Similarly, we can look at a summary of temperature. And so I want to point out that this is the 7-day forward rolling average temperature. This is a metric that Don Alley and others came up with, which really takes steelhead life cycle into consideration. So this purple dashed line here is a 20 degrees Celsius threshold. And that threshold is about when there's more metabolic stress on steelhead as streams warm. But I should also say that this threshold is well below the lethality limit for steelhead, just to sort of say that once we get above 20, that's when the fish start to get stressed. So you'll notice that all of the gauges follow a pretty similar pattern temperature-wise, and that the San Lorenzo River upstream of Love Creek is the only one to have exceeded that 20 degrees Celsius threshold. Last year, the same gauge on the San Lorenzo River was also the only gauge to exceed that threshold, and that happened just before and at the start of the CZU fire. For the groundwater dependent ecosystem monitoring, I've just pulled out a couple of noteworthy springs just to provide a comparison between water year 2020 and 2021. These springs are sourced from the Santa Margarita, and they help provide insight into the aquifer in the Bean Creek and Ziente Creek areas. And similar story here, where we see that there was generally less flow in water year 2021 than there was in water year 20. Many of these streams have been documented to contribute a pretty significant amount of flow during the summer. So really getting that groundwater input to the streams. And I'll say Eagle Creek in particular has historically contributed more than 100 gallons per minute, often regardless of whether it's a dry, normal, or a wet year. So big production, well, not production, but input to the streams. Just to provide a summary, the data collected during water year 20 and 2021 helps us establish the baseline of the surface water conditions, particularly during these consecutive dry years that we're having. We see that during the second consecutive dry year, flows are typically a little bit lower than what we observed during water year 2020. This is the first water year after the CZU fire, which may have impacted flow and temperatures on the San Lorenzo River. And the San Lorenzo River upstream of Love Creek was the only site to exceed that 20 degree Celsius temperature guideline. And then just to summarize for this coming year, which is happening now, we'll be operating 5 stream flow gauges for flow, temperature, and specific conductance. As Georgina mentioned, we just recently installed a gauge on Bean Creek downstream of Mackenzie, and this data will also be paired with that well that will be installed. So a good comparison between the surface water and the groundwater levels in that area. And then we'll continue to make observations at groundwater dependent ecosystems. And I will point out that we'll be working with the county on the GDE monitoring this year. it's anticipated that the county will be taking over the GDE portion of the monitoring in the future. And I think with that, I'll take any questions if there are any.
I see Jeff's hand up. Go ahead.
Sorry. Okay, a couple of questions. First of all, it's a great report, good, very interesting data. The Eagle Creek flows despite dry years is very interesting. I'm kind of curious. It seems like that drains the southern end of the Santa Margarita range. It's possible that that might be getting water input from homes in the south end of Scotts Valley and potentially the campsites and stuff that's contributing to a guaranteed kind of base flow in that area. Is that something that makes a little sense? Or because I notice when I take bike rides there's always water going down there, even in dry years. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, Eagle Creek is pretty interesting. It is at the very southern portion of the Santa Margarita, and there's outcrops right there. And so we see that it pretty consistently does have a lot of flows, and that the conductance that the measurements we usually get are pretty low. And what that signifies is that the water is pretty recent. It hasn't been in the ground for very long. So it's a pretty interesting spot. And I'll also say that there have been some more extensive studies done on Eagle Creek in a report. I was just recently asked to provide a number of the reports that we've done previously to put on the website. And so that should be available to you pretty soon if you want to know more about Eagle Creek in particular.
Yeah, I do actually. That's interesting. So it's not very, the conductivity suggests that it's only been in the ground a short time. That's kind of a big deal. But what about sand? Sand is probably doesn't react with electrolyte wise with the water as much, right?
Yeah, in general, the Santa Margarita tends to have lower specific conductance values. We've seen that pretty consistently in our monitoring. Okay.
One other comment about mean rainfall levels. In our area, if you do a histogram of rainfall versus year, what you find is that we have a lot of years with some amount of rain and then some years with just extraordinary amounts of rain. So if you look at the mean for rainfall, then the mean is going to be pushed up by these amazing years where we have just tons and tons of rain. And so most years we're going to be below the mean, which is kind of interesting. So I kind of wonder if we shouldn't be like thinking about the median a little bit, like rainfall year versus, the one that's statistically 50% of the time yearly, but rather than looking at the mean, which is taking the total volume of water and dividing it by the years. That's kind of interesting, different ways of looking at it. But that was one of your early charts. I just want to make a comment on that.
Yeah, no, that's a great idea. And I think something, we can play with as we continue to do this monitoring.
Dale?
Hi, thanks, Gail. Chelsea, thank you for that report. A lot of good information in there. Curious, so you're measuring, the conductance and the temperatures in the streams, and then how do you relate that back to where you think, the groundwater is entering or leaving the streams? Is that where you're using to kind of indicate where you think those things are happening? One question. And then just a comment, I'd love to see where, like there was two maps. We have the map where Georgina had all the monitoring wells, and then you have a map where you have the flow gauges. For me, it would have been nice to see where, have those two on the same map to see kind of where, where the monitoring wells are in relation to where the flow gauges are, just so we can, for me, that visual really helps to see, how those are relating together. So.
Yeah, that map does exist, and it is in the GSP. It might be slightly different now based on where we've landed with the monitoring wells. The stream flow gauges were pretty well established at the time that we finalized the GSP, but Georgina would know how much change there's been. But so that map does exist, and it wasn't in this report, but it's a good point. And then also to answer your question about specific conductance, that was a big part of the accretion monitoring that we've done in previous years, where I can't remember if you were a part of some of those presentations, but it's almost like a budget of both flow and specific conductance throughout the watershed. And we were able to look at how the flow was changing, where there was an increase in groundwater, and we can sort of use specific inductance as a tracer in some ways to look at where we're getting larger groundwater inputs.
Ruth?
Yeah, I was intrigued by the about a half a cubic foot per second increase in Bean Creek. I have a theory, but I'd like to know if you have any theories about that, or is that just noise?
I'm sorry, you said the increase in Bean Creek?
Yeah,
Oh, at the end of the year?
no, between 2020 and 2021.
Oh, I think it was pretty comparable. You know, I think it'll be really interesting as we start to really pair the groundwater data that we're getting with the surface water and see what's happening within the basin, which is really the goal of this monitoring network. And as we're able to implement that, I think we're going to hopefully be able to answer some of these questions about how the two are connected and what we're seeing.
And my question was, could it be related to some of the camps on Bean Creek and the lack of action and lack of septic flow during the pandemic year? Is that the right amount?
That's an interesting idea. I hadn't thought about that, of how, you know, people's water uses during the pandemic may or not be influencing like septic flows or well use, honestly, you know, if people are at home more and that kind of thing too. But yeah, that's a pretty interesting idea.
Thanks.
Okay. Jack?
Yeah, very informative report. I would just suggest, it was hard to read the text. It's possible to use a better font or a different font. The letters are kind of squashed together and part of my eye.
Great. Noted. Thanks.
You need to note the average age of the member of the board.
I didn't say that.
Oh, no, wait, the median age. Okay. All right. Any other members of the board like to ask a question before I go out to the public? Let's see, do we have any questions among the attendees? I don't see
Online
any.
attendee, please raise your hand. We have one in the public here, no hands raised.
All right, then I think we're ready to go on to
We do need an action from on this item.
Oh, that's right. So we need a resolution that tells us that we're going to accept this report.
Yeah, we need
Not a resolution, a motion.
motion. Yep.
I move that we accept the report, the whatever it is, streamflow monitoring report for 2021.
I will second.
Was that Dale?
Yes.
Okay.
That was Dale.
Okay, we're gonna do a roll call. Director Anker,
Aye.
Koenig,
Aye.
Brown,
Aye.
Cassidy,
Aye.
Koopman,
Aye.
Pollock,
Aye.
Gillis,
Aye.
Stiles,
Aye.
Terry,
Aye.
Smalley,
Yes.
and Mayhood.
Aye.
Passes unanimously.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is the agreement for administrative and planning services and data management system.
I believe that's Sarah, you wanting to just give a.
Yeah, there's it's pretty much all in the staff report. So just as a summary, last time at the last board meeting, you heard from Tim Carson and you reviewed the proposal from the Regional Water Management Foundation for the administrative and planning services. We got no real negative feedback either here or in the Mid-County Groundwater Agency. So the county is in the process of moving forward with that contract. It'll be approved by the Board of Supervisors on June 7th. It is a 3-year contract between the county and the Regional Water Management Foundation, as we had discussed many times. So the amount in the agreement between the county and the Santa Margarita Groundwater Agency is encompassing that full 3 years. We also included the anticipated cost of the data management for the next 3 years as well, to give the agency a complete idea of what these costs are going to be, and to make a complete revenue agreement. So the total amount for the 3 years of the halftime services for the planning and administrative support and the data management system is $807,000. And then the amount that for this year was already approved in the fiscal year, or we already discussed the last meeting, and it's in the fiscal year budget for this year. So happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Okay. Are there any questions among the members of the board? I don't see any. Any among the attendees? I don't see any there either. So in this particular case, we do need a motion to, let's see, suddenly the agenda disappeared from my.
The reason, just for people that it might seem funny, the reason we do that when we go into discussion, we take away the share screen, because then attendees are able to see everybody, not only the speaker, but I know sometimes it's a little challenging, so.
Okay. Well, we now have somebody asking a question. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, thank you. I just wonder, we haven't mentioned tonight about something that was sent out to us about the grand jury report. And I don't know if we're supposed to dig into that or not talk about it tonight, but it seems like it pertains to the structure of us going forward. And we're sitting here talking about a contract for the next 3 years of management going forward. And it seems like we should consider that, or at least discuss it more, and before we make this decision. So I wonder if we shouldn't put this decision off for 30 days while we allow that report to percolate through the process of discussion and stuff. Although there may have been many people involved in discussion, I haven't been involved in that. So I just thought I'd put that out there.
I think I understand where you're coming from on that, Jeff, but I think the issue is that we need to have something in place for the administrative services by July 1. And the county is going to vote on this at their next meeting. So we kind of need to move in parallel with them. The other thing I would say about that is that the grand jury report is, it's kind of something done at 30,000 foot level. And actually what they're suggesting in that report was whether we need some kind of overarching organization, that would try to coordinate efforts. So I suspect that it wouldn't have a lot of impact on the day-to-day running of Santa Margarita. And that's what we need to deal with, partly because Barrett's going to be leaving, but we just need to settle on this contract. So I don't think we can afford to put it off by a month. Anybody else want to comment on that? Okay. I will say, Jeff, just to add to that I was planning to say it later, that I'll just reconfirm what we said in the email that Perrette put out, that we will have on the next agenda for next month a discussion of the grand jury report that just came out. So we'll talk about it then.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments or questions from members of the board or attendees? Okay, well, we do need a motion.
This is Ingfer. I'll move the recommendation.
Okay, so I think I'll just read it out loud just for the record, that the motion is that we approve and authorize the staff to execute the agreement with the county in the amount not to exceed $807,047.
I'll second that.
Thank you. They go around. Director Anchor,
Aye.
Koenig,
Aye.
Brown,
Aye.
Cassidy,
Aye.
Koopman,
Aye.
Pollock,
Aye.
Gillis,
Aye.
Stiles,
Aye.
Perry,
Aye.
Smalley,
Yes.
and Mayhood.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is the budget for fiscal year 2023.
I guess that's me. There is no changes to the numbers the board saw last month. The first attachment on page 3.4-1 is the last column there. Fiscal year 2023 is what you will be considering here to approve. It is little maybe misleading in the sense that half or a little over half, 650,000 of that is actually amount that was previously budgeted in the current year. And just because we didn't get the monitoring network construction completed, it's a carryover from prior year, and it is fully funded by the grant amount. So it's considerably smaller amount is the total expenses that we are looking to collect from the 3 member agencies. And then also we have 2 new participants in the revenue cost allocation, Mount Herman and City of Santa Cruz. So you see the respective percentages there. And the second attachment, -2, is something that just gives a little bit broader view going all the way back to fiscal year 2018. And those are all actuals, 4 years. Fiscal year 2022 is where we are now. Those are estimated actuals. And fiscal year 2023 budget, the gray numbers is a little more detailed into all of those major cost categories. And also the total, that kind of interesting to see, 6 years, 4 million is what this agency has spent or is planning to spend, including next year. And then the grant budget in the last 2 columns to the right, 1.644 million is what we have already approved to receive from the state. And in order to receive that, we had to spend 2.864 because the first grant was 50-50. The second grant, round 3, was 75-25, 75 being the grant amount, 25% being the match. So, but we have spent slightly more, not too much. I'm very, very kind of proud looking at that. So those 2 numbers together would be 3.5, and we have spent 3.9 over the course of the 6 years. So we've done a good job keeping the costs reasonable. So that's the end of my report. Any questions?
Any questions from the board? I don't see any. So how about from attendees? I don't see any there. So I need a motion from a board member regarding approving the fiscal year 2023 budget.
So moved.
I'm sorry, who was that? Who did I get?
J.M. Brown.
Okay, thank you.
Second,
Cassidy.
Koenig. I'll beat you to it.
So I got Koenig for second. Let's go and do a roll call. Director
Yes.
Ankers,
Aye.
Koenig,
Aye.
Brown,
Aye.
Cassidy,
Aye.
Koopman,
Aye.
Pollock,
Aye.
Gillis,
Aye.
Stiles,
Aye.
Perry,
Aye.
Smalley,
Yes.
and Mayhood.
Aye.
Well, we have a budget for next year, passes unanimously. Thank you.
All right. We don't have any administrative reports, but we have 2 brief staff reports. The first one is about youth outreach.
Dawn can actually see if I can. Kelly, let me see if I can move you over to a panelist. You should receive a notice. Okay, I think you have arrived.
So sorry, it muted and turned off my video when we did that. I'm back. Thanks, you guys. Thanks, Gail. Hi, I'm Kelly Krotkov. For those who haven't met yet, I've been working on youth outreach for the agency since about February 2021. In that time, I've worked directly with a few classrooms, created a Google Classroom for a groundwater steward program, which is a self-paced educational opportunity that has a little gameplay at the end. We also did some online trivia quizzes through social media. More recently, I got to attend the Salmonen Conference day tour on the San Lorenzo Valley River watershed, and also presented to the Henry Cowell docents about our basin. That was really fun. Currently, I'm also in talks with seeing if there's opportunities to work with the Henry Cowell State Park and their visitor center, and if there's some way of educational opportunities about the basin that we can reach out to people that way. Last year, we did a number of public outreach events. We attended farmers markets in Scotts Valley, Brookdale Car Show, Scotts Valley Art Beer and Wine Festival, and we did our own public outreach event. And this summer, we'd particularly like to continue the farmers markets. Last year, the farmers market seemed to be a great way to reach out to members of the public in the basin. It was an opportunity for people to ask questions. Generally, we had a steady stream of interested people asking questions or wondering about the agency and the basics of what we were doing. Board members were able to speak with their constituents. We also had a number of private well owners interested in the work the agency was doing. So I'd like to also encourage if any private well owners are able to come out, that would be great. This year, people might be particularly interested in the work this agency has been doing, just due to the current drought conditions, and it's more to the front and center issue for people. Right now, we could use board members to volunteer, particularly for a few of the events. There's a Felton Tuesday farmers market on June 14th, Scotts Valley, Scotts Valley is Saturdays, July 23rd and September 3rd. I will resend out an email to all of you. So more than one board member is welcome at any given time. It does help if I have at least one board member with me, even just, it's great to meet all you guys, and it's also helps logistically just to help set up or take down. So I'll follow up with an email. Please feel free to let me know if you have any questions, and I look forward. I hope to see you guys out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Are there any questions from members of the board? Okay, I don't see any. How about from members of the public? I don't see any there. So we'll go on to our next staff report, which is from Rick Rogers, and he is responding to the comment that Jeff Koopman made during the oral communications section of our last meeting, where he was talking about concerns that some of the well owners had in around his neighborhood. So take it away, Rick.
Thank you, Chairman Hood. Yes, during our last meeting, oral communications, Jeff Koopman.
Is Rick really soft to everybody else?
Yeah.
Rick, lean in.
Okay, my apologies. All right, yes, during oral communications at our last meeting, Jeff Koopman, representing the private well owners, stated that SLVs increased in groundwater pumping in our Quail Hollow wells due to the CZU fire damaging our surface water intakes, had caused water production issues in private wells in his area. The district since early January has been operating off surface water, been benefiting from that great December 2021 rainfall event. We just started pumping our Quail Hollow and our Lumpico wells in the Olympia area in beginning of May. We strongly believe that the district's operations has not caused the current groundwater issue that was discussed. Both myself and County Resources Sierra has supplied information, reached out and supplied some information to Jeff. I spoke with Jeff. The county has also supplied information about possibly financial relief for hauling of water to homes that are experiencing water supply issues. This agency does not have a process to deal with this kind of situation when private wells go dry. With the drought, this could be just the beginning of several issues with some of the private well owners and maybe even our own. It might be worth our while to think about how we respond to these types of concerns in the future. And that's my report. Back to you, Chair.
Okay. Thanks, Rick. Jeff, would you like to respond to that?
Yes, I would. Yeah, thank you very much, Rick, for those communications, and that was informative. And the pumping is located further away than just over the hill. I know there's some San Lorenzo Valley Water District properties just over the hill from us, so I wasn't sure where they were located. And when I learned that better, that helped clarify that they were probably further away. It's not definitive that the increased pumping hasn't caused the wells to go dry, because we don't know enough about the geology. And we could be in a bathtub of Santa Margarita that's surrounded by impermeable stuff, and it could be that they did suck it dry or not. There's no way to prove it or definitively one way or the other. So I'm comfortable with there's not a direct correlation between the two necessarily, but we just don't know enough to make that decision. It's too complicated to figure that out. But it is an interesting topic. How do we figure these things out in the future as we go forward? We have increased pumping in one location and maybe some wells going dry in another location. Maybe they're related, maybe they're not related. Who knows? It's a complicated question. There were 3 different wells in the neighborhood that did run dry unusually. So it was
I think what Rick was saying is that you reported them running dry before San Lorenzo Valley started pumping in that area for the year, because up until very recently we were relying entirely on surface water.
Yeah, but the time constants involved in transverse permeability of water there's delays. So the fact was that up until a few months before the winter, you were drawing water heavily from those aquifers. So that water, it could have taken time for those lower levels to work their way up through the aquifers to those regions. Those are time constants. There's a time delay there. So it's not clear that that's the case. That just because they did go dry more in the midwinter, and the SLV Water District was by midwinter using surface water. So right at the time when they went dry, maybe they weren't using. There was not a lot of water draw from San Lorenzo Valley Water District, but again, the water delays, the time constants involved in water moving sideways through the aquifers takes time. Pressure versus time, there's those things that play out if you look at the math. But anyways, that's just a comment. It's not something we can figure out at this point. It's something that we should think about. How will we handle that in the future?
Yeah, I think the important thing here is, for example, you're in that neighborhood and you did not experience this. So
I'm in the Monterey, yeah.
Yeah, and so
one of the other well owners were up more in the Margarita, so their aquifer could have dried out. I'm deeper down in the Monterey, where
there's complexities. You're right. So it may make it a little bit different. But this kind of brings up the larger question of, we're not equipped as Santa Margarita to send out a hotshot team to, try to diagnose. But it's a good question. What should we as an organization, and because we can't have high-level staff like Rick and Sierra, going out and checking everybody's wells and then finding out somebody's well is fouled by, iron-eating algae or something. So I think you're right, Jeff. We need to, at some point, discuss this as a group of what, kind of the way we want to approach these kinds of concerns, which are likely to come up more and more if we continue to have dry conditions. So I think you're raising an important issue. Ruth?
Yeah, I just wanted to know, Jeff, what is your neighborhood? Where is this happening?
It's Upper Lockhart, near Weston Road. Actually, Weston Road's right there, just out the window.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe you should put that well that they refused on Weston Road on your property.
Yeah. We actually have a feeler out to the Western Road.
How are you? I'd volunteer, but
If I were you, I'd sell an easement.
I think the Monterey aquifers are kind of silly because you're basically going into a impermeable region to monitor the water level. So it's actually kind of, I think there's fractures and stuff involved in operating the water there, and the water's flowing in from the Santa Margarita maybe downwards or bubbling up from the Butano or Lompico, and you're getting those side effects because the Monterey itself isn't really producing or transmitting water sideways. It's just.
Well, most of it's downwards from the Santa Margarita, or
I think that's
there are a couple of sandy horizons in the Monterey. So if you're fortunate enough that your well punctures one of those, you're better off than in the rest of the Monterey, which, as you say, is largely fracture controlled. And then, boy, that's problematic.
Yeah, if I knew what I knew then, I wouldn't have let them do what they did. They double cased me through the sandy Margarita, and then I'm only open in the Monterey. So I get very minimal flow, but that's what it worked. That's what it is. We did hit oil though.
Any comments by attendees? Okay, then what do we have next? We have individual directors' reports. Are there any individual directors that would like to report to us tonight? Jack, go ahead.
Yes, I'll just briefly, I got to taste some great Scotts Valley water yesterday. It was a nice little tour of the newer facilities and the investments been made to improve the taste of Scotts Valley water. And so I enjoyed the tour and I enjoyed the taste of the water.
Great.
Thank you, Perrette, and others, Dave in particular, and your staff was there as well.
Thank you.
Eden.
Thanks. I had no idea about the tour, but we got a call at our office of business in Scotts Valley today by a reporter from the Sentinel who was just looking for someone who worked there who lived in Scotts Valley and tasted the water and could comment on whether or not the water was good. And none of our staff had tasted the water recently, and so they got me on the phone, and I went and got a fresh cup of it out of the tap, and we did a little taste test over the phone, and I gave some notes and comparisons to 10, 20 years ago very favorably, and it was just an interesting surprise call. So.
Okay.
Did it have a good nose and legs and all of it?
All right. Thank you for that update on the bouquet of Scotts Valley water. Do we need to talk about the future items? Do you want to make any comments about those, Perrette, or any other members of the staff?
No, I don't have anything to add. Some of those have been there for a while, so apologize for not getting those moving along. But on the next one, there are a couple of events that if any of you are interested, I know they're coming up quick here at the beginning of, Donna, if you could move the slide to the next one. The 8 and 9, yeah. The GRA events, I know a couple of years back, a few of them have attended them. They're back in person in Sacramento. The summit is just one day. I think Sarah, you're going to be there. But if any of you is available and interested, we do have some travel funds, and you can get in touch with me. We can get you registered and traveling.
Okay. Thanks for alerting people to that. And I don't see anything else on our agenda other than to adjourn. So if there are no objections from members of the board, I will adjourn this meeting until our next meeting on June 23rd.
I
Thank
say
you all.
Chair Mayhood, you're like right on the dot. 2 meetings around 7:29.
Yeah, well done.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Good night.
you. Bye.